Our first item of business tonight is our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Scout Troop number 321. All right. Go ahead, guys.
Audience, please rise. Color guards, front and center. Color guards, please prepare to present the colors. Color guards advance. Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guards, post the colors. Two. Color guards dismissed. The audience may be seated.
Well, thank you, Scouts. Very good job. And while you're up and around, why don't you come to the mic and have your 15 seconds of fame and tell us who you are.
I'm William Jury. I'm a sophomore at Bellarmine College Prep.
Hi, I'm Ben Kuzber. I'm in 6th grade at Tierra Linda Middle School.
I'm Jonathan McGuigan. I'm freshman at Carmont.
And then we have two in the audience, I guess, who aren't a part of your process. Huh? Well, we're going to recognize Eagle Scouts in a moment, but first let me ask if we have any changes to the order of the agenda. Anything from council or staff? Then the agenda stands. Council communications and announcements. Matt just got off the plane from a trip to Pass Christian. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Indeed, I just got back from a 7-day trip to Pass Christian, Mississippi, and we had a very large contingent this time. This is our 5th trip that we've gone down, different folks, but 5th trip for San Carlos. And the work we did, we worked on 3 different homes that I'm aware of, a lady named Andorra and another woman by the name of Helen, and then a 3rd woman by the name of Carolyn, and did various jobs. I know in one house we sheathed a roof and put roofing paper on one half of it. On Andorra's home, we did a lot of work on the interior and the exterior, built a deck to her home. A lot of these homes are up, they're all up high on piers, and so building a deck means building, kind of a place for them to walk out on at level with the house. So we were doing that. We had 18 people from San Carlos who went down this time, and the overall picture down there is there's still a lot of work to do. I was rather surprised. I thought going down this time might be, starting to close in on it. But I don't think so. There's a lot of work, and to put it in perspective, I was talking to someone about this today, would be to imagine here in San Carlos if we took 70 or 80% of the homes and just simply wiped them out. And if you could drive down Walnut Street and Elm Street and Cherry and so forth and just see, foundation after foundation without a house on it, that's what it looks like. And if we were to take Laurel Street and just, wipe out all but maybe 3 banks, because the only buildings really that survived were the banks that were made out of concrete. All the other businesses in the downtown were gone. Now, we've seen some progress. A lot of things are building back in the downtown area. And then, of course, homes. I think about 200 homes are being built a year in Pass Christian, which is, small steps forward. And then we also saw evidence that some of the churches are building back, and that a lot of the churches have schools associated with them, and the schools are being built back as well. One of the sites that is right in the downtown area was prepped up for starting construction soon. So with that said, another important item, we did have a dinner with Wilma and Lou. Wilma was the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce and had connectivity with our chamber. And Lou Rosardi, who's been here in this chamber with us, is one of their council members. They called them aldermen there. But so we had dinner at their house one evening. And I think you'll probably find us planning another trip in the future. We do have a meeting coming up, I think, October 30th, the group that meets to organize this stuff on an ongoing basis. And we're going to be talking about a dinner coming up in February, a fundraiser dinner that we plan to have, and then probably our next trip, which I'm going to guess will be in the spring of next year. So if anybody's thinking about going along, missed it this time, maybe look at going in the spring. Thank you.
Very good. And thank you, and thank all those who went. It was a great effort and a great performance, I think, on behalf of San Carlos.
And the mayor was there as well. He and his wife.
As well.
Yeah.
Bob?
I have nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Inga?
I just was going to share with my fellow council members, I don't know if you recall, but a couple council members and city staff went to China, believe it or not, it was 5 years ago, to explore a sister city relationship with a small district within Beijing, and we're having our 5-year anniversary reunion this week, and it'll be interesting to catch up with them again and talk about progress that's been made in the last 5 years within China, and to share some of the information or some of the learnings that we've had here in San Carlos. So it was a wonderful trip. There were 22 of us, I believe, or 23 of us from the city that went and had the opportunity to tour through China. So I'm looking forward to that dinner.
Very good. Thank you. And I'll just second Matt's discussion regarding Pass Christian. It was a great trip, and we would encourage others to be involved as we continue the rebuilding process. I do want to recognize a couple of events that we had since the last meeting. On Sunday, Vice Mayor Lewis and myself welcomed Radio Disney to San Carlos. And we had a couple of hundred screaming teenagers outside the front door, just couldn't get enough of Radio Disney. And it was really a great effort, a lot of fun. And we really want to welcome them to our commercial community. And I hope that it's a good move for them. I think it says a lot for San Carlos, and perhaps, who knows, we may be the center of broadcasting in the future. Maybe CNN is next. It's hard to say. But we'll start with Radio Disney, and we're really glad they're here. Next door to Radio Disney, and this, by the way, they're on Industrial Road. You're not likely to see their shop unless you go down to 965, I think it is, Industrial. Go toward the back by the freeway, and that's where they are. Next door to them is another operation which is new in town, and this is Hiltz Auto Electric Green Showroom. This is an electric car operation. They have scooters, they have mopeds, they've got cars, they've got little pickups. Everything they have so far, you can't drive on the freeway, but they assure us they're coming out with something in the future where you can. It's a great operation. If you see a little three-wheel car, one in front, two in the back, driving around town, that's from their showroom. And I've got my personal eye on a moped. I think maybe that's coming my way. It's a wonderful little operation that'll get me to work and back in no time. So we want to welcome them as well. And I also just mentioned that I had the opportunity to attend the Packard 101 program at Packard Children's Hospital. And if you ever get a chance to do this, take them up on it. It's a wonderful opportunity. The high point was standing in the operating room, watching them operate on a 6-pound child, a heart surgery, and it's such a wonderful the way they do it, the way they stage it. You get all dressed up and you got the mask and everything on, and you stand looking over the shoulder of the surgeon, and you're watching this little heart thumping along, and they're doing their sew up of whatever they're doing. But I never had that opportunity before. And it was a great opportunity to see how the hospital works. So if anyone here or in the audience gets invited to that, or if you want to be a part of it, check with the Packard people and get on their list, and make sure you take advantage of it. So with that, we'll move into presentations. We're privileged tonight to present proclamations to Sam Weber and William Jury on receiving their Eagle Scouts awards. As you all know, the San Carlos community has been on big on Eagles this year. I don't know how many we've had, but you guys must be 6 or 7 or 8. There's been a number of them, which means that you all kind of started at the same time, I presume, and you all went through the program, and you ended up where you are tonight with your Eagle designation. Scouting, of course, is a wonderful program, plays such a great force in our community and the lives of these young men, and we really applaud the work that they've done, as well as all the ongoing work that their leaders and scoutmasters and so forth are involved in. So, if you'll join me at the podium, I'd like to present proclamations to you. Get over here, guys. I'd like to present this proclamation to Sam Weber on recognition of his achieving the Eagle Scout Award, and a similar proclamation to William Jury on his achieving the Eagle Scout Award. Now, traditionally, what we like to have the Scouts do is to tell us about their project. And so if you take a couple of minutes and go to the mic and let the audience and the council know what you did as your final project to get to this point.
I did my project at St. Charles Church in the parking lot in Tamarack. There were some tall juniper bushes, and I was a real hazard for children walking to and from school because the drivers couldn't see them, and it was a tricky intersection as it was. So I was asked to get rid of the junipers and also re-landscape the area. And then, in addition, I put up some new signs, moved to the old signs onto one pole, and made a red curb to remove some clutter in the area. Sam?
I did my project at my school, Summit Charter High School over in Redwood City, and there were a number of problems with our computer system and our tech system. Like we had really, really bad mice and some software issues with the computer, so I created a student tech team, and we now have admin access to the computers, and replaced the mice and solved the software issues, and we are self-perpetuating and will continue to exist indefinitely, even after I leave the school.
Very good. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Good luck to you. Thank you. All right, very good. The next is a presentation regarding the Community Center's 25th anniversary. It seems like almost yesterday that we opened this facility. Back then it was a senior center, now it's the adult community center. But 25 years it is, and there's going to be a lunch on Friday, the 26th, this Friday. It'll be at 11:30 a.m. at the adult community center. Vice Mayor Brad Lewis will be the speaker, and we'll have entertainment. Rick Slater, our Public Works maintenance worker, will provide music. And tickets can be purchased tomorrow, I presume, at the Adult Community Center. So we would invite the audience as well as the community to join and be a part of that event. At this point, I'd like to make a presentation to Jerry Cristione, who's the chair of the Senior Citizens Advisory Board, and also recognize that we have two other board members with us tonight. One is Kim Alchemesti and Julie Becker. They are both here as part of this celebration. The proclamation mentions several things. It talks about the wide variety of activity that goes on at the Adult Community Center. There's a lounge, there's a library, meeting rooms, and so forth, computer rooms, pool rooms, patio, you name it. It really has a lot of facility available for almost any interest that you may have. It does serve social and recreational and educational needs of adults in San Carlos, and the programming has changed over time to where it's now a broader-based adult presentation than simply senior presentation. So we encourage all adults to be a part of this community. It's a place for scheduled events. It also has activities and workshops. It has a food program. They serve dinner, or rather lunch, I believe, twice a week, and they're available for the public. And then they have a number of events that they sponsor throughout the months. Music tours, dinner events, trips. I saw a bus leaving once for the gambling casino. I presume that was got to be a bunch of adults who have nothing better to do. But whatever it is you like to do, you're likely to find it available at the Adult Community Center. So on behalf of the council, on behalf of the city, we do want to make this proclamation and make this presentation to Jerry. This is their 25th anniversary of operations at the ACC. Jerry? Oh, okay. Kim's here. All right, good. Well, this is our proclamation to you from the City Council and really from all of the community to the Adult Community Center. We wish you well in the next 25 years, and thank you for everything you've done on behalf of the adults in the community. If you'd like to say a few words for the benefit of our audience at home or here, please do so.
I'd really like to just say thank you very much. We've done a lot of hard work, and like you said, we've come a long way in 25 years. The last 5 years, I think, for myself, I've noticed some very major changes, and I think the next 25 years you're going to find even more changes. So please keep supporting us and come to our luncheon on Friday.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you. And remember, tickets are available tomorrow, so this is something for your Friday. Now we move into the hardcore business of the evening, starting with approval of our consent calendar. Consent calendar items will be considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request an item to be removed for separate action. So, from the council, anything to hold back? From staff? Anything from the public? Fine, then we'll take a motion.
I would move approval of consent calendar items 5A through 5E.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Next is item 6A, report on the city strategic plan and 6-month objective.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This report, if you notice from the staff report, was actually intended to be on the consent calendar this evening, and it didn't quite land on the right spot on the agenda. So I'll just give you a brief update, and we will put it on for approval at the next council meeting on the consent calendar. This strategic plan that we are currently in is the 4th, 6th-month version of that plan. It was adopted August 30th of this year, so we're about 7 weeks into this particular plan. To date, there were currently 2 items that have been completed within the update the general plan and zoning code 3-year goal, and they include finalizing the and recommending to the City Council for action the formation of the General Plan Advisory Committee and ensuring the completion of Planning Commission revenue and City Council consideration of the PAMP project. All complete. In addition, under the enhanced internal and external communication and customer service, the objective to recommend to the City Council for consideration equipment to broadcast City Council meetings and city events was approved by Council a meeting or 2 ago. There are 3 recommended changes that unfortunately you can't approve tonight, but we'll just let you know. They're all date changes dealing with the 3-year goal to improve city infrastructure. The first 3 objectives, the first being present to the City Council a revised cost estimate for the Hawley 101 interchange modification. The original date is October 8th, 2007. Staff's proposing to move that back to December 15th, 2007 to allow staff the necessary time to develop the report and to facilitate upcoming agendas. The second objective under that goal, which is provide direction regarding athletic field improvements, we're proposing, it currently has a date of October 31st, 2007, and we would like to move that back to November 30th, 2007. And finally, the objective to present to the City Council a conceptual plan for El Camino Real improvements, including landscaping and pedestrian improvements from Olive to Oak Street, which has a current date of November 10th. We propose to move back just 3 days to November 13th, which is the actual agenda that will be scheduled for. Those are the major highlights and changes of the strategic plan today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff?
Yeah, I just had a quick question regarding the last item. With respect to the improvements for El Camino, sort of north of Olive, are those going to include, or do they intend to be working with the transportation or transit-oriented development within the railroad corridor?
This section of the plan does not include the east side at all. The east side portion of it will be as part of the approval of that plan.
So the pedestrian improvements that are being noted here are strictly for the west side of El Camino?
Correct. Basically, this is planting trees and pedestrian lighting on the sidewalk and improving median landscaping.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Do we have a motion then to approve the...
Can't do that. Yeah. It's just a report.
Oh, just a
evening,
report.
Unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Then we move on to another report, 6B, which is the Heather School Athletic Field Update.
Mayor Davids and members of the City Council, I am here to give you an update on the Heather School Athletic Field progress. As you may remember, at the City Council meeting on July 23rd, staff was directed to perform a number of directions. They're detailed in the report there, and they all involved beginning the pursuit of exploring the synthetic turf option at Heather School. In the CIP budget, Council approved it June 11th, $1.7 million for the project, with $500,000 to come from anticipated donations. One of the directions you gave us was to make a request from the school district to give us an opinion on whether they would approve synthetic turf or not, and the other was to ask them for a funding contribution. At the school board meeting of October 11th, the district did approve installation of synthetic turf at the Heather School athletic field. The district did not approve a funding contribution. The next step will involve finalizing the joint powers agreement between the two governing bodies. At their district meeting of October 11th, there was some discussion about the proposed lease agreement, but they will be continuing that discussion and getting back to us with their proposals. As you know, from the July meeting, we had a draft proposal that we submitted to them. As noted, financing of the project remains incomplete. We need to identify a source for the additional $500,000, and staff has already begun exploring different options, including grants and potential community donations. As noted also, much of the $1.2 million that has been identified for park impact fees covered the 1.2. Some of those fees have been paid in a protest, so we'll wait and see how that plays out. We are excited to be moving forward, and we're already taking the next steps to follow council direction. These steps would include negotiating a draft lease agreement with the district that would then come back to council for approval, conducting the initial study for the California Environmental Quality Act or environmental review, and preparing an RFP, request for proposal, to hire a consultant to prepare that analysis for us. And we've started on preparation of that draft RFP already. Assuming that there are no substantial issues of disagreement between the two governing bodies, we would then release the RFP to select a consultant for the required environmental review. We would then return to council with the finalized draft agreement for your recommended approval, then finalize the lease agreement between the two bodies. Once that lease agreement is finalized and signed, then, as previously authorized, the city manager would execute the professional services agreement to have the RFP done. And that would only be up to a $50,000 limit. Anything above that would return for approval. So I just wanted to give you the update on that. I tried to be as thorough as I could. I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Barry. Questions for Barry? Matt?
I have one. Is there any connectivity expected between the lease agreement and artificial turf, or does it leave that issue out?
No, it includes the issue. It includes synthetic turf.
In what way?
It specifies synthetic turf.
So in other words, we would only have a lease agreement if we had synthetic turf, no synthetic turf, no lease agreement?
Correct, and that's per council direction.
It is?
I think it is. The council agreed to proceed with artificial turf. Therefore, a lease agreement, I would think, would reflect that use, because it does involve issues in terms of what happens at termination, how is the land returned, what's the condition on which the property comes back to the school. Yes?
Just the lease in draft form has included the option of synthetic turf. So, I mean, we still have the whole issue to be studied and to come back before the council before that's a done deal. Same thing for the school district. The whole idea is if you're going to put the money in for synthetic turf, then there's a longer term. It has to be amortized. That's the way it's been addressed. It's not as if, well, this is the only that it is synthetic turf. Actually, it has to be considered as an option by the school district as a follow-through from what the direction the council has given. But it's, any lease is going to be contingent on a project being approved in the future. So it's premature to say that the lease is only for, at this point in time, synthetic turf.
So just to point it out, Bob, the lease will be between the school district and the city. It will allow either surface at the pleasure of both parties downstream?
Correct. So, for example, if the city does go ahead and approves synthetic turf, then the school district is going to also have to approve that use for its field.
For the chair, Bob, didn't the school board actually, with their proclamation, vote to support synthetic turf? That's what their proclamation was, correct, a resolution?
I'll let perhaps Brian speak to that. But I understand they wanted to proceed in that direction. Again, no one has approved that as a project.
There is no project to approve until we've had an EIR.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And then secondly, my understanding is that if we didn't do a synthetic turf field, say there's not enough funding type of thing, that the current agreement that we have in place for the shared facilities would cover that. That we wouldn't necessarily need to have a
That's
revised
not
lease?
correct.
Or this is specifically for Heatherfield?
We have an agreement for Heatherfield, but it's a short-term agreement. And even if you put in natural turf, it's going to require a longer-term agreement for the improvements to be amortized. So the term of the agreement, the ability of the school district to simply just terminate it at any time, all those details have to be worked out.
Does that help?
Does. Thank you.
I had.
I appreciate the
questions.
city attorney clarifying that staff is proceeding to pursue what council directed the artificial turf, but no project has been approved because, as Councilmember Grocott pointed out, we don't have one yet until we go through the environmental review.
Okay, Inga?
I have two questions. First, with the fees that have been paid under protest, would you mind just elaborating just a little bit on what those fees amount to and what paid under protest really means?
Legally, I'm not sure it means anything. You pay taxes under protest, you pay fees. I'm not sure it's entitled to the same level of consideration. I'll just say this. At this point in time, there are issues related to the below-market housing requirements at 1,000 El Camino. Certain assertions have been made by John Baer and his attorneys. We are reviewing that. We have also gone outside and got outside counsel who is very familiar with a law that went into effect about 2-3 years ago, and we'll have a report back probably within a week or two, and we'll be looking at it further.
And the amount that's in question, or is it significant, or is it?
It potentially is. I mean, it's $250,000 is one segment. There's another $250,000 that is another segment. And I don't know exactly what the intent was with the submittal as to whether or not all those fees are being paid under protest, but that's the range.
But the point is, there's really no such thing as paying the fees under protest legally. That's my opinion. They're paid, they're due. If there are considerations that are due a developer for putting in below market rate housing, that's a separate issue entirely from whether you have to pay your building fees and your park fees and all the other fees. Planning fees, those are all due and payable. Now, there are some considerations that are due a developer for building below market rate housing after the city council has already approved a project and after building permits have been issued. We're studying that. We don't think those funds are going back.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question actually had to do with the $500,000 of funding that we're still looking for. Has there been any discussion with the school board around allowing corporate sponsorship of that field, or is that something that we can look at putting into the lease so that perhaps through the Parks and Rec Foundation that we might explore the option of corporate sponsorship for that field, or is it something that they would be perhaps opposed to?
We have not had that specific discussion, but that is something that we could definitely have.
Okay, I just throw it out there on the table. If we're looking for money.
You bet.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, this is a report. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Next item is item 9A, which is a public hearing on the on the.
7.
Did we lose one?
7.
7. Oh, I'm sorry. We did skip one.
2 actually. 7.
Right, thank you. 7A, we'll go to 7A, which is consideration of reappointing Dan Belloc and Kim Alchemisti to Senior Citizens Advisory Board. Both of these individuals are completing a 3-year term. They're eligible for another term. They both indicated their willingness to continue. In fact, their enthusiastic willingness to continue. So we would like to suggest that they be approved for another 3-year term.
I'll make the motion to approve Mr. Belloc and Kim Alchemisti to the Senior Citizens Advisory Board for a 3-year term ending October 13, 2010.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Dan. Carry on the good work. And now, make sure I'm on my agenda. We do have time for public comment. This is a time for public comment on items not on the posted agenda. Would anyone like to address the council on an issue which is not on our posted agenda? Seeing none, we'll carry on to 9, which is the discussion and request to authorize implementation of a red light photo enforcement program. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor Davids, members of the City Council. Greg Roth is Police Chief. I'm here tonight to talk about and give you my recommendation to go forward with the red light photo enforcement program here in the city of San Carlos. Before we go through that, I'd like to talk just for a minute on how we got here. As you know, the City Council goes through a strategic planning process every 6 months, and during the first process, they set 5 major goals. And one of those goals was to maintain and enhance public safety in San Carlos. And as an offshoot of that, several objectives were set in furtherance of that goal. And one of those was for the police chief to present a report and recommendation on red light camera use to the City Council. And that's what got us here. In April of 2007, we prepared a request for proposal and sent that out. And we, for red light camera photo enforcement, we had 2 vendors respond to that RFP. One of the vendors was Redflex, and it was the one, after consideration with police staff and city engineer, that we decided to go with. We believe that Redflex has superior technology. They have a very secure financial position as a corporation, and they have a superior experience in the field. In May of 2007, we presented the concept of red light photo enforcement to the Transportation and Circulation Commission, and they unanimously endorsed the concept for the city of San Carlos. And we're in a unique position here where at times technology presents opportunity, and I think that's the case with the red light photo enforcement. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Wade Bettisworth of Redflex and have him talk about the technology in the company, and at the end of that, and then I can talk a little bit more about the research that we've put into it, talk about the financials, and then what the next steps would be. So Wade?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council, City staff, as well as residents of San Carlos. On behalf of Redflex Traffic Systems, appreciate the opportunity to meet with you this evening. Red light running is a serious offense and can often lead to tragic consequences. Sometimes people just get lucky. There's 2 forms of output that are produced by our system. We capture both still images and the video, as you see here. The video actually captures 12 seconds of video, 6 seconds pre-violation and 6 seconds pre-violation, 6 seconds post-violation to provide the situational awareness of exactly what occurred. The statistics have been captured regarding red light running show that they're effective programs, effective not only reducing violations at those intersections where the technology is installed, as well as reducing collisions at those same intersections, but also achieving what we call either a halo or a spillover effect, where based on the fact you're implementing the technology in the community, you'll see benefits throughout the community, not only at those intersections where we install the technology. And there's plenty of examples within the state where these have been very successful. California Vehicle Code addresses photo enforcement, and there are a variety of protections that are built into the programs, including a requirement for a hearing, such as you're having this evening. There's a requirement for a warning period. There's requirements that the program be run by the policing agency within the municipal government, and a variety, as you can see, that are listed here. In terms of the process flow, delineating what the responsibilities are between the technology partner, in this case Redflex, and the city, as shown on the slide I have here. What is in green would be a Redflex responsibility. What is in white, these 2 areas here and here, would be the police department responsibility. In short, we're going to capture violations at the intersection. We're going to transmit those back to our processing center through broadband communications. We're going to do an initial review to make sure that a violation occurred, to make sure it's prosecutable, and to finally do a quality assurance phase. Once we've gone through those 3 stages, we will do the registered owner lookup, in which we will use that information to populate the citation. At that point in time, we will, for violations that have passed this threshold, we will pass this on for police department review, and point out that it will be the police department, only the police department, will make the final decision to either accept or reject a violation. Those that have been accepted, we would be notified of that fact, and we will then print and mail a citation on behalf of the city. That would be received by the defendant, and the defendant would have the ability to either pay or, if they choose, to have a hearing in court. The following slides will give you an example of the type of information that is captured, actually what the police department will see when they do a review. We will provide them with the incident details, with the vehicle details, as well as the owner details. We will load a total of 4 images in what we call thumbnail. Those can be clicked to give an expanded view. The city or the police department will have the ability to review the video, and ultimately they'll either be accepting or rejecting each violation. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, this will be a combination of both still images and the full motion video. The first image we capture is what is known as Scene A, and this is with a car behind the limit line. We capture as many red light indicators as we can. You'll see several here that show that. We also, at the point of capture, we affix a data bar. The data bar would show the time and the date, the location, the lane the vehicle was in, the speed the vehicle was traveling, the speed limit for the area, and most importantly, how long the light has been red, in this case 2.1 seconds into the red. The next image we capture is called the Scene B, and that's the car continuing through the intersection, and also shows how long the light has been red, in this case 3.5 seconds. There's some flexibility in terms of information that can be programmed into the data bar, and that would be, we would adjust that based on in consultation with the police department. We also take a plate shot. We would take a facial image of the driver. Now, anyone that's a passenger of that vehicle, we would obscure their image, so it's just the violator that would be shown. And again, that full motion video, which is shown here, the light now yellow, light changing to red, and your violator. Now, the still images as well as the video would be available to the not only the police department but also the defendant. The violator would have the option to would receive the citation, which has the still images on it. It would also direct them to a website address where they could look at the video themselves. And as you can see, the video is helpful in that process and quite convincing, so obviously that's something you would want a defendant to look at, to have that available to them before they came to court. So a variety of ways we'll work with the city in terms of doing public outreach. Public outreach is obviously important in this type of endeavor, to discuss how these programs have been successful in other communities. And there are a number of communities, not only in Northern California, but specific to your county, that are moving forward with this type of technology, including some that have been doing it for several years, which would be San Mateo as one example. We'll support the city in your efforts to do public outreach. One of the methods that cities use for a lot of different endeavors would be website locations, and certainly you can put frequently asked questions. You can give access through a connection through your website for someone to view, to actually view or gain access to the violation video. There's a requirement via the code for signage, and that's something that we would provide. There's also some benefits that are above and beyond the photo enforcement evidence side of it, in that we do provide as a part and parcel to this program the ability for the city to tap into live streaming video. There's a benefit to that to the police department in terms of if they were responding to an incident, having the ability to look at it in terms of determining what your needs are from a dispatch standpoint. There are equal benefits to your traffic engineering department, your public works, having the ability to view that streaming video pretty much 24/7 to do any kind of study that traffic counts or just getting a sense as to what the flow of traffic is at any given time of day. And that's the prepared presentation. Obviously, we'd be happy to introduce or to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Wade? Yes, Matt?
I have a couple questions for staff and also one for Wade. So before he steps away, maybe he wants to address the question I had. You mentioned about the defendant or the accused, however you want to term the person that's been caught. So if you get caught, what is a person's availability to, or what's the availability of the video to the person who's being accused prior to going into court?
Sure, absolutely. That's available. We actually will print the URL or website address on the citation. So when the defendant receives the citation, they'll have the ability to go on the website at home. If they don't have access to the internet at home, they could obviously go to a public library or other sources. Some police departments will make that information available too, and be able to take a look at that on their own.
Okay, thank you. Very good. And then I had a couple of questions for staff.
May I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure. Follow up.
As long as we're, just for clarification, when we're looking at a designated intersection, does that include 4 cameras, so all 4 directions?
It could. Typically, it does not. When we talk about a system would be one direction at an intersection. So obviously, we could have as many as 4 systems at an intersection, but typically that's not required. In most cases, we'll see 1 or 2.
So the under the expenditures from staff report, the fixed fee of $58.70 per month for each designated intersection, that would be for 1 camera at one pointed in one direction.
That's correct.
So if we did it at 4 cameras at 4, that would be actually 16.
That's correct.
Of those. Okay, thank
Well,
you.
typically we don't do it that way.
A follow-on question to that. How do you get the frontal shot if you got the camera pointing to the rear? Does that imply 2 cameras?
Yes, exactly. We need a rear camera and a face camera. The rear camera typically is the slides that I showed you. The scene A, the scene B, and the plate shot are typically taken with the rear camera. The face image is taken with the face or front camera.
Okay. And following on Inga's question, does the amount that we're talking about, the $58.70, include both of those cameras?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes us to capture the required evidence for a one direction of travel. Now, that would be all movements. If you had left-hand turns, straight throughs, and perhaps combination right-hand turn and straight through, we would cover all those types of movement in one direction, north, east, south, or west.
Just through the chair, just a follow-on. So if you have 2 cameras, 1 on each side, is one, if you had 2 intersections, both directions, then would you have 4 cameras?
That's
or
correct.
do you use the single camera that's, I guess because of directionally where it's pointed,
Right.
you would need to have it dedicated to a front shot or a rear shot?
That's
depending
correct.
on- Okay.
We would have, for each direction of travel, we're required to have a front camera setup and a rear camera setup. So if we did 2 approaches to an intersection, then we would have a total of 4 cameras.
Okay, thank you.
Can you tell us about the camera? Is it a small unit like we see on some of the light poles or traffic signals on El Camino now? Or is it a larger unit like I think I've seen outside of Hillsdale on Hillsdale Boulevard near the shopping center?
Well, we actually have some flexibility in terms of how we deploy. We have what we call our traditional approach, which is a housing that would have multiple cameras in it and the required central processing unit and communications gear, et cetera. For those cities that have aesthetic concerns, we have the ability to do a kind of a modular approach where we would even have the ability to attach to existing city infrastructure to minimize the impact. So we can certainly work with staff to determine the best solution to meet your needs.
At nighttime, the one I'm thinking about at Hillsdale, I saw someone go through and there's this big flash of light, which I presume was triggered because he went through the red light. Is that how they work? You get a flash at nighttime when you catch somebody?
That's correct.
Okay.
The video really works off ambient light, but the still cameras need supplemental light to at night to capture the image.
And then final question on the hearing. Is this a hearing through the normal traffic court? As a speeding ticket or other ticket would have a hearing? That's where you go for a hearing on this?
These are handled in the same manner as a conventional citation.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions for Wade?
And for Wade, I have more for staff.
All right. Thank you very much.
May I continue on?
Pardon?
May I continue with?
Yeah, did you
question
have
for
anything
staff?
else you wanted to add, Craig?
I want to talk a little bit briefly about the research that we did. We went ahead and, as you saw from the staff report, we did what was called camera hangs at several intersections to see the violation rate. And we have the violation rate for each of those intersections and or approaches in the staff report. We've also done, the city engineer also did a kind of a cursory review over intersection accident history, just to give us an idea of where we're at with respect to accidents in the community and violation rates at the intersections. You talked about the financials already, so you know that it is $58.70 per approach, and then approximately $30,000 for administrative fees associated with us actually processing the citation internally and working with the courts and possibly going to testify on those kinds of things. We're estimating a fee of approximately $30,000. And this is a 3-year contract, and we're asking for up to 5 intersections. But our current plan really is to do 1 intersection at this point and to see how that goes and then make decisions later. So the next steps for us would be, if City Council approves this tonight, is basically to do some more detailed surveys with Redflex. There's some intersections we haven't taken a look at yet, and we need to do that. We'll select 1 intersection to move forward with. If we have to, we'll work with Caltrans. If it's a Caltrans intersection, we're going to have to get their approval to go ahead and work hang, and then we will monitor and see how it goes. And I'm prepared for any questions that you have.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, I was looking at the analysis, and I was curious. We had the accidents, and I was looking for comparisons, and when it talks about red light violation rate in San Carlos, and you looked at 4 intersections, and I just didn't see Holly and Industrial in a chart above regarding accidents. Do we know what the accidents rate is there at Holly and Industrial?
No, these were the top intersection accidents that we received from the city engineer. And again, these are accidents that occurred, or the police report was written so that it occurs in the intersection. So this is what we have from Switters, which is the Accident Reporting Administration, and these are the top producers in terms of accidents within the intersection.
So we looked at Holly and Industrial just because we know it's a busy intersection when you did your red light violation
Yeah, I got
survey.
these from the city engineer, and these were the top producing intersections and accidents. And I was surprised to not see Holly and Industrial there myself.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying, though, is it wasn't in the accident report, but it was selected as a review intersection, and that's because you just know that it's busy and it has a lot of traffic.
True. It has a lot of traffic, and also we have the double right turn lane there that's not brand new, but relatively new.
Yeah.
And we also have the possibility of having really more traffic through that intersection possibly in the future. So.
Correct. Okay, and then the last question I had was, I didn't see anything in here about comparatives to doing this program with red lights versus, just staffing an officer, on a motorbike or in a car, however you do that, to move throughout the city on an ongoing basis, specifically to be watching for red light violations, say at peak traffic hours or however you would do that. But I didn't see any kind of comparison of that and how much money that might cost us versus going with this program.
Well, it's really hard. It would be hard, and it's almost there's no comparison in a way. And I can tell you, there's a lot of flexibility with officers and maybe not so much with the camera. But the camera works the intersection 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In order for an officer to work an intersection or intersections 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if we were to devote 1 officer around the clock, it would take 4 to 5 officers to be able to do that, because each has to have their time off and vacation and whatnot. An officer could cost $140,000 a year if you were going to have them specifically to monitor intersections for red light violations. Then the other point becomes, once there is a red light violation, depending upon the intersection, it's sometimes unsafe for an officer to go through the intersection to get the violator. As an example, at Holly and Industrial, a good spot to kind of watch red light violations is one of the service stations, and you can see them run the red light. But at a congested moment, trying to bust through the intersection with your light and siren creates a hazard for other motorists and also for the officer. So, the red light camera, in terms of monitoring intersections for 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, is more cost effective, I think. And believe me, I don't want to suggest that I wouldn't want officers. Mm-hmm. It's just in terms of, for that specific function, the camera is again, it's an opportunity, and technology presents opportunities, and I think this is one of them.
And a follow-up question that comes to mind as you were speaking is taking this kind of evidence into court versus an officer going into court. And do you have any professional comment about that? Which I'm suspecting maybe this holds stronger as evidence, not that an officer, doesn't hold strong evidence, but when you've got a picture and so forth.
It's interesting. You're right. The evidence is stronger from this system. Officers who are testifying may not have the evidence. The system, though, takes its hits in court, just like any defense attorney will take something on. And this gets taken on for the fact that it's a system and it's a camera, and how do we know it's functioning right. But what we know about what's going on in traffic court is that the police department, in particular San Mateo has been leading it, has been successful in traffic court and has successfully squashed challenges raised by defense on these citations.
Okay. Thank you.
Next.
Chief, on page 5 of the report, you have listed possible red light violations, and it said survey time 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Is this just one day?
That's just one day, and it's only 12 hours. It's
Right.
only a 12-hour period.
12-hour period, so in 4 intersections that were selected, which obviously are high-traffic intersections, but there's 4 intersections here, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4 intersections, it looks like, some various directions. There were 161 in just one 12-hour period.
That's correct.
That's just, I can't, it's just unbelievable that it seems that there's that many in a 12-hour, I mean, you're talking about you're talking about 4 an hour in intersection, so to speak.
Right, and that's, again, those are running straight through the red light. They're left turn and right turn violations. And some of these captured had very zero tolerance for right turn violations. So if you didn't make a complete stop, you were counted as a violation. And, it's interesting, Channel 4 News was in town today. They know about this staff report and this council report, and they were videoing intersections. And I talked to the reporter today, and he counted quite a few, and he was pretty amazed at what he saw with respect to red light running. And it is, and again, it's extremely hazardous type of a collision, those intersection collisions.
These numbers really open mine. I mean, I just had, I think I asked someone on staff earlier, and you just verified it. I just couldn't believe it was one day. I thought it was like 3 or 4 days or a week or something like that. It's just, these numbers are just unbelievable. But anyway.
And one thing that we know, based upon the research of red light cameras, is that their use at intersection will reduce those numbers. Right.
And I think that's one of the strengths of it. Thank you.
Inga?
Yeah, actually, I had a couple of questions. First of all, is when we issue a citation for running a red light, what is the net revenue to the city for that citation?
I think it's approximately $140.
And right now, how many are we actually issuing and winning on an average?
I'm sorry, I don't have that, but I could get that for you in the future if you'd like.
Let me tell you a little bit of my concern. I started, doing the math here, and there's really not enough information from a budgetary standpoint to understand what the total cost of the city is going to be for this program. If we did just the $58.70 for each designated intersection, that gets us 4. That's a net cost, I figured, to the city of $281,000.
Well, what we're proposing at this point is one intersection approach. So one intersection approach is one direction of travel.
But to Bob's point, as a follow-on, one intersection approach isn't going to cover or isn't going to catch the number of red light runners. That's the 160 that, if we looked at the 9 intersections that you took with the different directions, that's actually a cost to the city of almost $650,000 a year, just for the first year, plus then cost of living or CGI increases incrementally after that.
Correct.
And in my perspective, it just seems to me that that's an awfully heavy cost when we could look at putting uniformed police out on the streets that may be actually more of a deterrent for that same amount of money and may be able to provide more benefit to the city than just a couple of cameras that are focused very specifically on one area. My second question actually has to do with, I was noticing on page 11 of the contract, we're actually on the hook for a 5-year commitment because they're basically amortizing the reimbursable costs of $50,000 to $80,000 per intersection across 5 years. So if we decide to opt out within the 3-year period of time, we still would have 2/3 of the cost or 2/5 of the cost to bear to pay back to Rediflex, in addition to the amount of money that we've been continually paying them on an annual basis. So where, from a budgetary standpoint, where would we find that money?
Okay, well, let me address the first point first, and that is what I think staff agrees with you, that it would be extremely costly to do all those intersections. And so what we're proposing at this point is this, is on the concept of red light camera photo enforcement, we believe is technology that's been shown to reduce violations at intersections. We can't put the city on the hook for $600,000 or for inordinate amount of money. So the idea is, let's bring the program into the community. Let's do one intersection approach right now. And that one intersection approach puts us on the hook for, say, $70,000 a year. We know that in order to recapture that money, we would have to have approximately 6 violations a day at that intersection in order to get us at or just past the break-even point for paying for that intersection approach. Now, the downside to that is we don't get all the intersections cambered up that you spoke about. But what we do get is the opportunity to have the program in the city and to put the signs up at the city, at the entrances to the city that says we have the program. 3, 4, 5 months down the road, we may see a net revenue from this. And we may decide at that point to come back and say, hey, let's add a second camera. Maybe let's add a third approach. But the plan is incrementally so that we don't give the city too much exposure financially in the program and to incrementally bring the program up to speed.
So with the numbers where you're actually doing the red light violation rate, the 161 that Bob referred to, was that a single direction that was being captured? That was all 4 directions?
That was, I think there was actually, it looks like there was 8 or 9 approaches that totaled 161 violations. That wasn't just, those were multiple approaches.
So if we're looking at just one as a trial period, we're basically locked in or committed for, I'm assuming, 5 years.
No.
Even though I know you said 3. But, we're going to end up paying, otherwise we'll have to pay them to take the equipment back out.
I can let the city attorney address that contract point in just a minute about in terms of that. I think if he might have the answer to that. I don't want to put him on the hook if he doesn't. But with respect to the approaches, we'll just be on, if we're not on the hook for that intersection. We can move the camera. The camera, we can move it to intersections. If we're very successful in reducing the red light rate at one intersection, we can go ahead and move it to another intersection. We won't pay an extra fee. We'll only be paying for one approach. So we have the ability to move the camera from one intersection to the other and still pay the one camera fee if that's what we want to do. Or we can bring up a second camera. And in terms of the contract, Bob, you might, I don't know if you have.
My understanding is a 3-year term. Right. That's what we negotiated for.
It is, however, in Section 6.3 under termination for convenience, we actually are required to reimburse for up to a period of 5 years.
That's if we terminate the agreement before the end of the term.
No, I understand that. And if, indeed, from a budgetary standpoint, it doesn't end up turning out to be a revenue center for the city, but ends up actually costing more money, future councils may decide from a budgetary standpoint that they'd rather have that money put elsewhere, in which case we're still sort of locked in for 5 years or end up having to pay at the end of 3 years.
Through the chair, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Councilwoman Doherty, I respect your number crunching ability, but I think we might be off on a little tangent here, and maybe correct me, Chief, if I'm wrong. Let's say the net cost is, if we got no money from this, it's $100,000.
Approximately, yes.
But you indicated that each red light would, if we had that, would be a net $140 to the city.
For each red light violation that's paid, we will net $140.
Okay, so if you take 140 and divide it into $100,000, okay, you get, let's see if I can do the math right here, you get 710 violations. Is that right? Approximately 700 violations? Okay, somebody's going to have to help me here.
Leave that to the accountant, I think.
Pretty close. Brian, can you, okay, 700 violations, which is 2 a day.
At one intersection.
At one intersection.
Going
the
in one
smallest
direction.
intersection we have that they tested was 1. Let's assume we don't put it there. The next one is 5. So
right, and then the other higher producers were somewhere in the 40s.
Right, and you wouldn't put it at the 5. You'd put it at the 18 or the 20, let's say. Or, let's assume that these numbers were double what they would be in the next day. I mean, who knows? Maybe that was a bad day. I mean, you can. All you need is 2 a day. It's just it can't. I mean, I should say can't. Nothing is. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's just it's automatic that. And even if it did cost us some money, let's say we had 1 violation a day instead of 2. It would cost $50,000, but gets people to pay attention to running red lights and gets people to slow down or do whatever. I'll spend $50,000 right now to do personally to do that. So I think this is this is a wonder. Personally, I just think it's a great program.
And that's why we're
maybe
presenting
I'm approaching it from a different perspective than you are. But to me, this is a non-starter number-wise. It's believing these numbers, even if they're 6 times bigger than they would be the next day, it seems like that this is it's not going to cost that much, and even if it did, it's worth it for the safety of our community.
But just from the standpoint of a budget, pure budget numbers, if indeed, being ultra-conservative, we get 1 a day, then it's going to cost $50,000.
Right.
And we already know that we have a structural budget deficit. So
Right.
I didn't see anything in this that actually sort of called out where they're actually getting the numbers from or how it's going to impact the budget or what we might have to cut if indeed it doesn't produce revenue
Your
like we
point's well taken,
anticipated.
but from what the numbers they provided with 161 on just a normal day, theoretically a normal day, but again, I just think that that's so. It just seems like it's like you could be ultra conservative and you could get 2 a day. I mean, that's just the numbers the way I run them. But anyway, difference of opinion, which certainly we can have.
All right, I do have a couple of questions regarding the technology. Is this a hardwire system back to City Hall?
No, it would not be hardwired back to City Hall. At the intersection, we're hardwired, and then we would send the evidence via broadband communications where we process it. Then this is available to the city for review based on a secure internet connection, user password protected.
Okay, so the city will be able to pull up via computer the results of the camera?
That's correct. We're not working off your server. You'd be working off our server in terms of doing the reviews.
Okay. And is it an ongoing process where you're just filming 24 hours a day, or do you just simply film when there's traffic entering the view of the camera?
The system operates and stands ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The cameras only flash when there's an indication that there's likelihood that a vehicle is going to violate the section of the code.
Right.
And that's done typically over time, over distance calculation through sensors that are in the road. The video runs continuously. As I mentioned, the streaming video aspect there. So that's the video will run continuously. But the still cameras only flash when there's a likelihood that the vehicle is going to violate.
So then, is your company or is the city monitoring the video to determine the violators?
The system automatically does that.
The system does it.
That's
so
correct.
The system, then our people go in and check what the system produces in terms of.
Actually, that's each of those violations would be sent over, and then we would do the initial review, and then ultimately put that in the police department's inbox, so to say, for their review.
Okay.
If I'll also go back, if I can just touch on the what we've seen with these systems is not only an impact at the intersection approach where we're installing the equipment, really to the layperson, they don't know how the system works. So if we put one system in an intersection, in terms of the layperson, we actually sign in all 4 directions. They really don't know what direction of travel we're capturing the image in. So really we're seeing that spillover or halo effect throughout the community, and specifically even to a greater degree at the intersection where we install the equipment. So regardless if we're capturing northbound, you're going to see change in behavior in all 4 directions.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question that I thought of during this whole discussion, and that is, we mentioned when Councilmember Doherty was talking, about the cost of equipment and so forth, and what it is to operate it and so forth, and the chief mentioned the effectiveness, and so did this gentleman, about how violations come down over time because people realize the cameras are there. So it came to mind, one of the programs I've seen used with police cars is you leave a police car somewhere, and there's nobody in it. It's sort of a stealth image. Do you have the same product with your cameras, where we can install cameras where nothing's really going on, but people think there is? And could we save money by that approach? Always thinking,
There are a few communities that have deployed what are known as dummy cameras. The issue is it would really be probably more effective for transient traffic than it would be for those that travel on a regular basis. Because what happens typically is that people figure it out, and once they figure out it's a dummy camera, then they basically violate knowing that they're not going to be called into court.
Okay. But we could not that we would want that approach only, but what I'm saying is we install some cameras at some intersections that are live and perhaps dummy cameras at other intersections that are not live.
Sure, that could be a strategy you could deploy, certainly.
Okay, and you have those available if we wanted to do that?
Basically, we would install a housing.
Oh, I see.
The same housing that the camera would be mounted in. It just would not have a camera, an active camera.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The only
anything
thing I
more?
would add is if somebody ran the red light at the dummy intersection and did not receive a citation, they lack the reinforcement to not repeat the behavior. So I think that's the disadvantage of that. But doing them in conjunction could be an idea that we would consider.
Okay. Well, you had mentioned, Chief, that we might take a camera from one intersection over the 3-year period, move it somewhere else. Well, maybe what we do is we move the actual camera, but we leave a housing there so people don't really know what's going on. Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one other question. I did notice that this did not, at least there's nothing in the staff report indicating that this went to our Traffic and Transportation Commission. But
It did go to Traffic and Transportation in May of this year, and they voted unanimously to reinforce the concept of red light photo enforcement.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief. This is a public hearing. We have 2 requests for speaking. Nick Pegarius, and followed by Robert Clendenine. Nick?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Nick Pegarius, Walnut Street. Wanted to reinforce the analysis that had been done regarding the budgetary impact of this program. If we go at six violations per intersection or per installation, every day of the year, we're looking at a net revenue in the neighborhood of over $250,000. If that's the true goal and the true purpose of this program, it would be, I believe, good governance to explicitly say that this is for revenue purposes. For safety purposes, I question why the Walnut and San Carlos Avenue intersection was not included. I don't know what it is about that intersection, but for some reason, people just fly right through, and I drive that nearly every day, and it is quite frightening. I would encourage the council, should behoove them, to involve the citizenry in this process in selecting intersections as well as determining whether or not this is appropriate for our community. It is important, I've learned over the last several months, that keeping citizens involved in the process beyond the public hearing, actually conducting meetings within the community, goes a long way to restoring faith and good confidence in governance and in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I ask the speaker a question? Sure. He seemed to indicate that we had picked an intersection, but we haven't actually. Staff hasn't picked one. Or were you saying that you would suggest Walnut and San Carlos Avenue as the intersection?
I would suggest, council member, that the city council request a public meeting so that this issue could be discussed with the citizens of the community. There are 4 intersections that are identified in the staff report. One of those is not the Walnut at San Carlos Avenue.
So you're suggesting when an intersection is chosen that we then have a meeting with the public, or at least a council meeting where that's discussed and so forth?
Perhaps that, or in advance of making a decision on this particular agreement tonight, holding a community workshop.
A workshop, I see. Because if I may, Mr. Mayor, this is a public hearing, which is that intent. But I think I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Clendenine.
Good evening. I just wanted to start by saying someone is going to get killed, and unfortunately it's going to be in the crosswalk at El Camino and Holly. I am in law enforcement, but above and beyond that, and more importantly, I'm a pedestrian. I cross Holly El Camino twice a day to get to the train, and frankly it's safer to jaywalk than to cross on the crosswalk. I'm particularly talking about the northbound El Camino turning right onto Holly. You'll you're concerned, you were commenting, Mr. Griselli, about 2 per day. You'll probably get that about 2 a second at that particular location. I think there will be a lot of money flowing in, and with all due respect, I think placing a uniformed officer frankly would do no good, because when the officer goes to effect a traffic stop and issue a citation, there's going to probably be 5 or 10 more people running the red light, and the 24/7 monitoring will get every one of them each time that it's happening. I run a lot in San Carlos. I ride my bicycle a lot, and frankly, I do that going against traffic. And the reason I do that is because I know consequences of someone that is killed by a car is pretty much slim to none working in law enforcement, and I don't want to be a victim of that. And again, as I said, jaywalking across El Camino is safer than going in the crosswalk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Horst Young.
Good evening. I hadn't planned to speak on this subject, but obviously I couldn't help myself. Neither pro nor con on this issue. However, it seems excessively expensive, $58, $70 a month. It's just, having been in a similar business, that seems very expensive, and I'd actually consider that. And as we all know, it's probably not going to pay off for a long while, and we're already in financial trouble. Let's question this cost. This is a very high cost per month. I think that's unjustified. Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail Close? That's okay. You just come on up. Hand it in on your way. Oh, well, we'll finish. We'll do it for you.
Hi, Gail Gose. I am really in favor of this program, especially for the right turns on red. When I lived in Cleveland, the mayor's daughter, Mayor Voinovich, who's now Senator Voinovich, she was 8 years old and killed at an intersection by a driver who did not stop at a red light before turning right. It was very shocking, and as this gentleman says, that's a major concern.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Who'd like to go first?
I will.
Okay, Matt.
If you like. I appreciated the comments of the first gentleman, especially who said, you know, if we're after revenue, then we should say so. And I will say so. I'm not after revenue. I'm after safety. And the way I see this program is I think I'm going to be in agreement with Mr. Grisilli. If you run the numbers, I don't think there's much risk here of us falling behind in revenue. I think, on the contrary, we will gain revenue out of this program. And then what I see for that is exactly what's in the staff report, is that we can then use that money to plow back into other traffic and transportation issues. And one of those, quite frankly, I think if we're in the neighborhood of even $200,000, that's another officer. And then we can have an officer that reinforces what the cameras are doing. And as I was questioning the chief earlier about having an officer either on a motorbike or a car monitoring some of these intersections, or I think, as a gentleman suggested, some of the intersections like Holly and El Camino, which I agree. When I want to cross El Camino, I almost never do it there because I know what goes on at that intersection, and I would rather go down to the train depot, and that's even not all that safe at San Carlos Avenue and El Camino. You get the same procedure of people turning right. You really have to catch the driver's eyes to make sure that they see you, you see them, sort of thing. But my point is, I think this program, if anything, is going to result in revenue, net revenue to the city, and that revenue we can use for other programs. I agree with the staff report that money should be committed, should be set aside in the so-called lockbox that would use it only for traffic and transportation and safety issues in San Carlos. So I would be in favor of this program.
Bob?
As I said earlier, and about the safety issue and the dollars and cents of it, I think I'm old enough to remember, I guess it was the early 1970s, perhaps I'm dating myself, when the seatbelt law finally went into effect, at least on a nominal basis, and certainly now it's in full force everywhere in California. And I remember when I was younger, I never could figure out why I should wear a seatbelt. And I think that might come with the youth that I had. And now, needless to say, I never go anywhere without buckling it up, and I feel like I'm naked if I don't have it on. And in some sense, I think this is a similar thing. Our society is in such a hurry, and I'm not going to say I'm not in a hurry sometimes too, but we're all in such a hurry to go somewhere or to do something, and time seems to be the thing we have the least amount of, that this alone, I think, it's a small step, but to start educating folks that they have to actually stop at a red light or a stop sign, believe it or not, even though they know nobody's coming or no one's come there for 6 months or 6 years or whatever, but that time someone is coming. And I really believe that this program is the first step for us, and I believe it can be, at a minimum, revenue neutral and possibly be positive. But again, as I said earlier, even if it's not revenue neutral, I believe it'll be close enough that the money will be extremely well spent to try to get folks to understand that the cars that we're driving are big, big things, and they can do an awful lot of damage to pedestrians, bicyclists, and other cars, as evidenced by even the little video that we saw there, to help ensure the safety of our city in the future. So I'm firmly behind this, and I believe it's going to be money well spent. Speaking to Councilwoman Doherty's comment about the budget, believe me, I'm well aware of it. But if this was an item that we had to vote on here tonight and our annual budget, it would be one that I would vote to spend the money on. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Inga?
Yeah, well, I guess my comments weren't intended to imply that I'm against this program, because I do think that anything we can do to increase pedestrian safety here within San Carlos and, in fact, up and down the peninsula.
I didn't mean to imply that you weren't.
Yeah.
If I said that, I apologize.
No, that's okay. But I just want to be clear on this. I'm just very uncomfortable about what I'm hearing from staff, which is we're going to try it at one and see what happens, and the actual contract that's before us, which is actually for up to 5 intersections. And I just don't have a good sense from a budgetary standpoint. We've got a lot of hypotheses around, what the revenue numbers really are going to look like and how they're going to offset the costs and things like that. But a lot of the comps that were in the staff report actually were for significantly larger cities like Fremont and Emeryville, Oxnard, Culver City, a lot of the areas where, I think that traffic concerns, it's a lot, they've got a lot more traffic concerns than we do here. Having said that, I would be comfortable moving forward, but with a little bit stronger direction to staff that they're authorized to do one with budgetary on one, and that they have to, before they can do additional ones, come back with a real budget number. Given how much revenue is actually coming in over a period of, I don't know, whatever it may be, 90 days or 120 days, so that we can really understand what the revenue and the expenditure cost is and what that does from a budgetary standpoint. And similarly, also just work with the vendor to perhaps get some numbers so that we do have a trial period, and if it does indeed become cost prohibitive, that we have a way of understanding that before we sort of all in on this. But that's really my concern. I just don't get a good sense from the staff report that we really understand a true budget picture, and we're continually cutting costs. We know we have a structural budget deficit, and this is not being presented in a holistic way, that this is how it comes in with respect to the rest of the budget. If we had unlimited money, yeah, absolutely, there's a lot of really good programs that I think we as a council would like to implement, but we don't have unlimited money. We know that. We come at this every 6 months and try to sort of whittle down programs or try to reduce the expenditures to keep up with the revenue and the structural deficit. So those are my concerns. Again, I would I'd be prepared to support this, but I would like to put it within a more of a contained proposal.
Through the chair.
Yes.
might we ask staff to tighten up the contract so that we're not committed so strongly? And as Councilmember Doherty suggests, perhaps we would also have some kind of monitor on this where we might be given, I would suggest quarterly reports so that we can see what we're doing and maybe we commit to a year for certainly at some particular intersection, and then beyond that be based upon the revenues that are given to us on a quarterly report. And if we could adjust the contracts to state something like that, perhaps we could bring this back and get it finalized.
Is that possible, Greg?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I mean, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, the contract that's before you has been negotiated, and at one point it was 5 years, now it's 3 years, and so there has been some give and take already in the document that's before you. Secondly, I mean, I think administratively and from a budget standpoint, in that it is an extra $100,000 or thereabout for each direction, it would be something that we would be coming back to the City Council for budget authorization, and it would be our hope that we would set up a fund for this purpose, and that if the fund is producing the revenue that some of us might expect, that those monies can be dedicated, and we would come back and get your authorization to use some of that money for a second or third leg. I'm not sure that that an amendment is necessary. If you'd like us to do that, we could go back and work on it and bring it back, but I think we could probably handle this administratively through the budget.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you just include that in your motion, if someone was to move the staff report with an addition that no additional lights be placed without the issue being brought back to the council for approval of additional placements of cameras, I think that would do it. We don't have to amend the contract to say that.
Okay.
It does. I think to the point the city manager was making is that's already in our standard procedures because the amount triggers that it would automatically come to council.
That's correct, yes.
So I think we're covered there.
All right, so would you like to move?
Sure, I'll move approval of this program with all matters that are in the staff report. Did I hear then that we could add quarterly reporting on the first year?
Sure.
As part of the motion, sure.
Okay, so if we could add quarterly reporting, at least within the first year.
And recognize any additional locations would come back for budgetary approval?
Yes, recognizing that according to our own procedures, it would, yes.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion, yes.
Question. So how is the actual intersection then going to be determined? Is it the police chief that will actually determine? Because the contract's fairly vague on that, and the motion is as well.
Yes, I'll basically, the police department will make the final determination in consultation with the city engineer, and we'll use a variety of criteria by which to select the intersection, including accident rate, conversion speeds in the intersections, volume in the intersections, hangs and counts. We may count a couple more intersections. A gentleman brought it forth today, San Carlos Avenue and Walnut, so I may be able to work with Redflex to see if they'll do a hang there to see what the counts are there, and then take all that criteria into consideration, and based upon that criteria, place the intersection where we believe, place the camera where we believe it'd be best suited.
And that decision will be based not on a revenue basis, but more of a pedestrian or a safety perspective. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could we have, Mr. Mayor, as part of that process, simply an informational item on the, once I agree with the chief, we leave it to the chief, we don't need to decide it, but just as a matter of public awareness, a report to council, informational, that this is the intersection that's selected, so that before the equipment goes in place, people are somewhat aware if they watch council meetings.
There's going to be a public outreach, community outreach campaign when we select the intersection for the public, but we certainly could be glad to do an information report at that time to council as well if you would like.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion made and seconded. Anything else? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Okay, moving along to item 9B, also a public hearing. This is a consideration of abandonment of a variable width strip of public right-of-way along the southeasterly side of the 500 block of Vista Avenue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the owners of the property located at 537 Vista have requested this abandonment because they have a carport that actually portion of it is within the public right-of-way, and they plan to demolish that and build a garage approximately the same location. It might be a larger garage also, and see it doesn't have any use for this strip of right-of-way, and we recommend that City Council order abandonment of this strip of right-of-way.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Parviz?
Not on. I just have one question, is we had seen one, I thought, at our last council meeting on Vista Avenue. Do they tie in together?
This was that was on the other side of the street.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay, so it does tie in together in a way.
Right.
Right. Okay, thank you.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this issue?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion
I would
carries.
introduce resolution number 2007-71 for the abandonment of the strip along Vista.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Next is consideration of the City of San Carlos and the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency for a resolution approving the issuance of sale of tax allocation bonds by the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency not to exceed $17 million.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, Jeff Maltby, Administrative Services Director for the City of St. Carlos. I actually do have a brief PowerPoint, and the computer has shut itself off conveniently. So if you'd like, we could take a short recess. I could try to bring the computer back up, or if you prefer, I can just...
These notes are pretty good, Jeff. Maybe we can just carry on with what we have. What do you think?
Just go for it. That works for me.
Are you going to tell us anything different than what we have?
Not much different in terms of the staff report. Just to provide some overview, the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency has two current existing bonds. The 1995 bond, which is about $1.4 million, used to finance a portion of the construction of the Elms project, the assisted living just over here adjacent to City Hall. An additional bond, the 1997 bond, which was a refinancing of an earlier bond, the 1991 bond, which was the original bond to establish the RDA and begin to pay back the city's general fund for money that had been loaned to the RDA at startup. Those funds were primarily used for public improvement road project type public works within the project area. The existing interest rate on the 1995 bonds, 6.38%. They're scheduled to reach maturity in 2025. The 1997 bond has a existing interest rate of 5.4%, and they're scheduled to reach maturity in 2026. The RDA currently pays approximately $800,000 a year in debt service. Now, this is coming before you tonight because we have an opportunity that was presented to us by a statewide pooled revenue bond program coming through ABAG. They've done several of these over the years, and in fact, I think the was it the 1995 bond that was a pooled tax bond. The issuer of these bonds would be ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. Some of the benefits to the city include a minimal issuance cost due to the pooled structure of this particular bond, going in with a number of other cities who will be issuing bonds at the same time. We would receive low interest rates with a AAA insured bond, and Brian could comment to this, but I think the last time in 97 when the city issued bonds independent, I think we had a AA rating, which is an excellent rating for a city, but this would be obviously even better than that. There's a streamlined documentation. This reduces the city's cost, the RDA staff's time and expense in terms of issuing these bonds, this refinance. The finance and refinance is based on the current tax increment available within the RDA. As mentioned, ABAG would be the issuer, the bond underwriter, Henderson Capital Partners, bond counsel, Jones Hall. We have here this evening, sitting in the back of the room, Mimi Henderson of Henderson Capital Partners, and Stephen, is it Malikan? Of Jones Hall, and they'd be happy to answer any specific questions you might have. They've been tremendous to work with. We've we've pulled this all together in a really short amount of time, working with Al Savay, the Community Development Department, Mark Sawicki, and the City Manager's Office to bring this all together. Now, tonight before you, there are two actions, things that the City Council would have to approve, a resolution as well as the RDA Board. The first, and then in terms of what is actually happening within the recommendation, you can break it further into two parts. There's a refinance of the existing $8.9 million in bonds. That's the 1995 and the 1997 bonds that I talked about. This action would save the RDA about $100,000 per year in terms of debt service, about $1.8 million over the life of the bonds. The second part of that, though, would be staff has proposed to issue additional bonds, additional debt, new money, if you will, at the same time we do this refinance. Take advantage of the cost savings, plow the debt service savings money back into additional bonds. This would generate an additional $7 million in new money within the RDA, bringing the total 2007 proposed bond issuance to $15.9 million or thereabouts. And in the staff report, it says not to exceed $17 million, and that's just to give us a little bit of wiggle room in case interest rates are to become more favorable over the next month or so before these bonds are issued. We could go higher. We're really, from the RDA perspective, working backwards off of what we believe the RDA can afford in terms of annual debt service now and looking forward. In terms of the refinance portion, the maturity currently for the 1995, as I said, is 2025. For the 1997 bond, it's 2026. Within the refinance, those two bonds would have a maturity of 2026, so it changes by 1 year for the 1995 bonds, but basically stays the same. Now, there was one error in the staff report. It talked about the new money portion of the issuance having a percentage rate of 4.79. It's actually 5.23 for the new money. That's the $7 million. The $7 million would have a maturity. The new money would mature in 2036. It would cost the city approximately $300,000 a year in annual debt service through 2026, at which time it would jump up to about $1 million a year. Basically, what we've done here is throughout the life of the 2007 bonds, be it the refinance portion or the new money portion, the city would pay about $1 million a year in debt service each year through 2036. So we've got a levelized debt service payment built into this. Currently, the city's paying, as I said previously, $800,000 a year. And with what we see in terms of available tax increment within the RDA, we believe that $1 million a year is not only a viable number today, it will be a viable number throughout the life of the bonds. Within the new money component, there's an additional split, an additional two pieces. It's proposed the $7 million is broken down, a proposed $3 million in taxable bonds. Taxable bonds are more expensive. That's the 5.23%, bringing that number up for a portion of the new money. $4 million of the 7 would be tax exempt. That money is less expensive, lower interest rate. It would be building in the repayment of the taxable component up front to help keep those costs low and help us levelize our annual payment. The taxable bonds offer more flexibility in terms of how they're spent. In terms of the efficiency to the RDA and any potential land assembly and development projects. The use of the taxable bond proceeds allow the agency to receive loan or land disposition repayments from benefited private parties. Tax-exempt bond proceeds is limited to certain types of projects such as public improvements, grants to private entities, including the write-down of land acquired for agency for a private development. So obviously there's a difference in terms of the cost of those two components, but also a difference in terms of how those things can be used. Taxable proceeds can be used for tax-exempt purposes, whereas tax exempt cannot be used for those same type of projects. Now, the staff report identifies a whole number of potential projects that could be used for these bond proceeds. This action tonight in no way limits the council to these items or commits the council to these items. Any type of project, whether we can think of it today or not, that would legally qualify as an RDA project would be eligible for the council to consider in terms of spending. With the caveat that we really do have to have the expectation that a vast majority, 80–90% of these funds would be expended over the next 3 to 5 years. That we're not going to be holding on to this money, that we really do foresee a purpose to issue these bonds and expend these money. So there's a list here to give you an idea of what we see now. Some of these things would be land acquisition type projects. Others would be public improvement type projects within the RDA. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I said, there are members of the Community Development Department here, as well as representatives from Henderson Capital and Jones Hall.
Thank you, Jeff. I have a leading question in terms of the $8 million in new money. Will we be able to invest that at about our cost until that money is needed?
Close. Right now, with what we see with LAIF, it would be very close. What I've seen predicted for LAIF over the next few months, we would not be quite recouping our cost on just the new money.
Right.
But in terms of what the tax increment is bringing in the RDA, you'll be recouping in the tax increment. It will be growing faster than this particular interest rate. So.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, so I do have a few questions. I'll start off with, I saw an article in the paper, column by Bill Paul, comparing cities, and we had one of the best bond ratings, and I guess that's attributed to Jeff. Is that right?
Well, I think it would probably. I'd be happy to take credit for
the article or the rating,
situation, but I think that's a reflection of years and years of fiscally responsible management in San Carlos. But thank you.
You're welcome. The question I had was, if for instance we did not go out for the new money, at least not the full 800. Or excuse me, the $7 million. We would, according to the staff report, we would have by refinancing the first portion, we'd have $100,000 per year savings.
That's correct.
Give us some idea of what the RDA might do if we had an extra $100,000 a year for the RDA's budget.
Well, you could save for 3 years and do the Britton Row acquisition, or for 5 years and do or actually a total of 8 years, and you could do the whole Britton ROW improvement program, the right-of-way. Beyond that, you could underground some utilities if you save for a number of years, do some streetscape on Olive and Oak. All these things would take you at least 3 years to save for with that $100,000.
In other words, we go over here to the Chinese menu and pick something and
basically
look at how long
exactly.
it takes. Yeah,
you'd save for it and you'd build it into the RDA capital improvement budget.
And then the other question I had was, if I understand the staff report correctly, we save the $100,000 by refinancing, and then by borrowing or issuing new bonds in terms of $7 million, we go back up to $1 million, whereas currently right now we're at about $800,000.
Correct.
So the way I see that is we've actually net added $200,000. If we were to do all these actions tonight, we would add $200,000 in cost annually to the RDA's budget.
Correct.
To pay for all this. So the thing that came to my mind when I was reading this is, how about if we kept it level? So we take the money we save, the $100,000, and we issue enough in new bonds that the $100,000 then goes to pay for those new bonds, the financing of those new bonds. What would we be looking at? Obviously not $7 million. Would we be looking at maybe $5 or something like that? Do we know?
Yeah, we looked at those numbers a little bit early on, and not quite that specifically, but you're on the right track in terms of, it would be a few million less.
Mm-hmm.
But what we were really concerned with was the overall health of the RDA budget. And while we often talk about, the structural deficit and the problems we've got in the general fund budget, we really haven't experienced those same problems within the RDA. It's a tighter budget. It's not got a lot of money to spend, but we did feel that, you wouldn't have to make a lot of adjustments to that budget to afford the additional $200,000. And since the purpose of that tax increment that the RDA is taking in is to be invested back into the project area, we felt that an additional $200,000 of debt service in terms of borrowing $7 million to be used as project money for the RDA was an efficient, effective use of that tax increment funding within the RDA.
So in other words, you're buying the future in a way.
Correct.
The only other thing that I had a question on, you commented on it, but it's the thing actually I feel the most uncomfortable about, and that's in Table 1, talking about the $7 million new money portion, and it's, if I read this correctly, approximately $300,000 annual debt service through 2026. Then we jump up to $1 million. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, and that's because we've levelized the debt service. If you think of the 2007 bonds as one bond for almost $16 million, you're going to pay $1 million a year until 2036. What I'm showing you is if somebody had asked the question about, well, you said that the refinance portion would drop off in 2026, and it does. You've paid off those refinance bonds in 2026, but you're still paying $1 million. What happened? Well, you've just kind of backloaded the new money to keep that payment levelized. Otherwise, it'd be lower now, and then over time it would creep up, and it would be over $1 million. So what we said is for the health of the RDA, for that RDA budget, we were very comfortable with having a levelized $1 million. And Mimi can probably explain it much better than I could in terms of how they come up with that.
I'm still not following. Maybe my council member Grisilli he understands money issues better than I do in that regard. I can count what's in my pocket, but
in simple terms, like a mortgage, when you go to borrow money for a mortgage, at the beginning of your mortgage, you're paying very little principal off. You're paying a lot of interest, and then it goes down like this. Well, I equated it the same way, whereas Mr. Maltby said at the beginning, if you wanted, you could instead of $300,000 on these new bonds, it'd be far less than that. And then instead of going down, of course, it would go up. Okay, what he's done is equalized it. So we pay $700,000 on the old and $300,000 on the new through 2026. The old then goes away, but the new then starts at $1 million, and just keep that $1 million, just stays for the next basically 29 years. It just stays like this. So as he said, they equalize the cost. Okay. And it'd be great to do it with sometimes if you could do it on your mortgage, you can't, they don't allow you to do that, but that's, I think, the way that you basically tried to, in layman's terms, it's amazing you can do it, but I think it's a great idea, because then you don't, otherwise it'd be, let's say 100, 200, and by the time you get to 2026, it might be $1.2 million, $1.3 million, $1.4 million per year on all the way down.
Right.
Just clarification, it's just the $1 million from 2026 through 2036.
Right.
It's only 10 years at $1 million. I mean, it's actually...
Well, it's really
the entire term at $1 million.
Right, you're going to pay,
it's $1 million.
The bottom line is you're going to pay $1 million a year until 2036 starting today. Within that, the money's being used to pay off different components behind the scenes, but as far as you would be concerned as a council, or we would really be concerned as the stewards of that budget, you're going to be paying $1 million a year for this new proposed 2007 bond through 2036.
You're buying in the new bond.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have two questions. The first has to do with our excellent bond rating. So if right now our bond rating, I'm assuming, is based on the 1997 bonds that we issued and our ability to, no, it's not? It's
The AA rating that we have is actually related to the library bonds and the general fund. Essentially what happened when those bonds were issued, San Carlos had not issued general fund bonds since the 1960s, and as a result of that, when former Mayor King and I did the bond presentations to the various rating agencies, the agencies gave us a very high rating because it's so rare that San Carlos bonds against the general fund. And because, as the council well knows, both today and in the past, the council has always followed a very conservative approach. And so San Carlos was actually one of the first small cities in the state to get what's called a pure AA rating. And the result of that was that the residents actually saved 20% on the library bonds versus what we had promised in the election. And then subsequently, 2 years ago, as you probably recall, in the summer of 2005, we refinanced those bonds again and took it down another $1.5 million. In this particular case, our bond ratings have been strong, but not at the AA rating, because the redevelopment agency, when we went out initially in 1991, was a relatively young agency. We didn't have a lot of revenue flowing. I think, as Mr. Malpe mentioned, the value of doing these pools through ABAG is because you're a part of a much larger and stronger group. Not only do you save because you only pay a part of the funding costs, but because you're part of a bigger group, you get a higher bond rating. And so in this particular instance, we get a sort of a double win here. Not only do we get lower issuing costs because we're part of a bigger group, but also because we're such a large borrowing and such a large pool, we're able to get the highest rating, the AAA rating, and basically paying only a small amount for the bond insurance. So it's a really good deal. But to answer your question, the AA is not related to redevelopment funds. It's the general fund.
So I guess really where I was going with that was with the issuance of these sort of new bonds as well as the new money. Does that do anything in terms of our bond rating if we were to come out or come up with a project, say, in a couple of years and we wanted to go out and issue some additional bonds? Or are they sort of separate and independent?
I think what is likely to occur is if, as Mr. Malpe mentioned, our redevelopment increment is going to continue to grow, so we may have an opportunity in the future, the redevelopment agency, to issue more bonds, that it is likely, I would imagine, that our rating could be at this level or higher without insurance. In this case, part of the reason we have a high rating is because we're buying insurance.
Yeah, and in fact, when Henderson Capital did the analysis for us, I believe they said we would currently have the capacity to go up to as much as $25 million. So they recognize that there's additional capacity there within the RDA now. But you know, we look at it more from a budgetary perspective, where they're looking at it as pure RDA tax increment, and we're already spending that money on other things, so it's not available in our opinion.
And so then my following question actually has to do with the new money, the taxable versus tax exempt. And it's clear the tax exempt pays for a couple of fairly significant projects that would be done, I think, relatively quickly. But the taxable new money barely is a drop in the bucket towards our largest sort of initiative, which is the Wheeler Plaza redevelopment. Can you speak to that? Because it just seems to me we're looking at $3 million out of just land acquisition estimates of $5 million, not to mention the cost of actually improving the location.
Well, that definitely was discussed at the staff level, and I think I'd like City Manager Mark Weiss to address that, as he's got some pretty strong feelings about it.
Okay.
We talked at the staff level about what the proper balance would be. And certainly the taxable bonds gives us more flexibility, and we'd like to have more to be more of a player, whether that be in consolidating some properties for the hotel site or being a player on the east side for some other project, or in the Wheeler Plaza project. But in looking at our infrastructure needs, that we've made some pledges. We heard the council's talk about a couple of infrastructure projects when we were discussing the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, for example. We thought that it would be in our best interest to, and we get the better rate on the tax-exempt financing, to have enough money to handle a couple of those projects that we can do in the short time period, but still have the $3 million available as a taxable issue that would give us some flexibility to be a player in one of the projects, whether that be on the east side or whether that be on Wheeler. We haven't made a definitive decision yet as to which way we would want to go with that. The fact of the matter is you could probably get a little bit more money if you went entirely with tax exempt, but as Jeff indicated, you're much more restricted in how those monies can be used. And whereas we can invest the taxable monies in a redevelopment project, and if the project doesn't work, we can sell the property and get that money back. If it were tax exempt, we would have to dedicate the resources to the project and make it as an actual contribution to the project, whereas this way we can be an investor and get a return on our investment. So we think it gives us the most flexibility. We thought we'd bring it forward in this format because we thought it gave us the option to go either way. We were able to blend it in such a way that we could live within our budget parameters. So just after some extensive discussion at the staff level, we thought this was probably the best option to bring forward to the City Council.
Is there, just as a following question, is there any time frame by which we need to actually spend the money, or if we go out to for a bond measure, is there a certain time frame that we have to commit to a project or commit to an investment, especially on the
Generally
taxable
considered
side?
to be 3 years, 3 to 5 years.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to speak on this issue? Seeing none?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any other questions for Jeff?
Actually, I just have a process question. I understand we've got 2 resolutions before us, so the first they have to be made independently, I'm assuming. And is there anything that we need to do to be seated as the redevelopment agency versus? Yeah.
You're already on the agenda as the redevelopment agency.
Any other questions before we go to motion? Comments? Someone like to move?
I would move adoption of resolution number 2007-72 as a city council approving the issuance and sales of tax bonds not to exceed $17 million.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes.
And then as a redevelopment agency, I would introduce resolution number, or I would move approval of resolution number 2007-146. 146, authorizing the issuance and sales of tax allocation bonds in the amount not to exceed $17 million.
Does this mean I can now vote against myself as a director, as opposed to how I voted as a council member?
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Roll call, please.
Agency Member Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Agency Member Grisilli?
Yes.
Agency Member Grocott?
Yes.
And Chairman Davids?
Yes.
Through the chair, can I just make one comment? I think this whole thing shows, again, why San Carlos is always ahead of the curve. Refinancing at the lower rates, saving us money, but yet looking ahead to know that we've got things that we've got to do. And I'd like to compliment all the staff, and I'm sure there was large discussion and pros and cons on all this, but I think it shows that our staff is on the ball to approach all these projects or all these situations and look at all sides of them. So I'd just like to compliment the city manager and his staff for really working hard and try to look ahead as well as save us money as we're in the current time.
Thank you, Bob. I'm sure we all agree. All right, we're moving now to item 10A and 10B. This is the second reading of the 2 ordinances were approved at our prior meeting regarding 301 Industrial, the PAMP project. We have ordinance number 1393 and ordinance number 1394. Yes.
Good evening, members of the council. This is the follow-up action to the public hearing that you held on October 8th when you approved, reviewed the environmental review, took action to approve the environmental review, and took action on the resolution to amend the general plan for the Palo Alto Medical Foundation project. You also at that time introduced 2 ordinances, and they are before you tonight for adoption. One would complete the rezoning for the property at 301 Industrial Road, and the other one would complete the adoption of the development agreement. With that, I'm available as our other city staff to respond to any questions you may have about this item.
For the record, these are the same ordinances we approved at the meeting.
These are the same ordinances that you introduced at that meeting.
Any questions on this? This is not a public hearing, but I see a hand go up. Would you like to comment? But you'll have to come up to the podium. And please give us your name.
Up there.
In the mic. Thank you.
record everything.
My name is Jeannie Teal, and I was at church yesterday, and my neighbor's son-in-law was there saying that the Palo Alto Medical Clinic is going to be a green zone, like they're going to change some of their usages, I guess, or something, and make it a green building, and it'll be the greenest building in San Carlos. Is that true? I mean,
Well, I can't say it's the greenest building in San Carlos, but they are moving into a green building process or planning process. They do intend to use green techniques and green enhancements as they develop their program.
That wasn't originally how they were, they
That's
didn't
true.
present it.
That's correct. That
Where
was
would
it.
I find out information on that then?
Well, pardon?
Our website.
Brian?
I would suggest that you might check the Palo Alto Medical website, and also representatives from Palo Alto Medical in the audience, and Mr. Jury and Ms. Montalvo, and they could give you more detail. But the mayor is correct. They are following the green standards for hospitals, which is a pre-lead process. Yes.
Oh. All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure that was true. That's what I wanted to know.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Do we have a motion on these ordinances?
I will move adoption of ordinance number 1393, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos rezoning the property at 301 Industrial Road from Light Industrial M1 to Planned Community PC and adopting a development plan for the new medical center, including a hospital, medical clinic, medical offices, central utility plant, and parking garage for assessors parcel numbers 046-051-020 and 046-051.070, based on the findings contained within Exhibit A.
Is there a second?
Second.
May we have roll call?
Councilmember Tico Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Mayor Davids?
Yes. And ordinance number 1394.
I will move adoption of ordinance number 1394, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving a development agreement between the City of San Carlos and the Palo Alto Medical Foundation for healthcare, research, and education related to the development of property at 301 Industrial Road, assessors parcel numbers 046-051-020 and 046-051-070.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Tico Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Mayor Davids?
Yes. All right. Moving along to item 10C, consideration of continued membership in Regional Government Services, RGS, and Local Government Services, LGS, Joint Powers Authorities. Mark?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, in 2001, the City of San Carlos played an instrumental role in forming the Regional Government Services and Local Government Services Joint Powers Agreements or authorities, and I've tried to provide some history within the staff report as to some of the original intent and purposes of forming the joint powers agreements. I think, in all honesty, the organizations have changed a little bit over the years as we've become aware of what its limitations and parameters for operation are. We are currently a member in good standing. We no longer provide the human resources and accounting services that we provided from the startup of these entities up until just last year. We have entered into an agreement with RGS and LGS for reimbursement of the expenses that we incurred in providing those incubation services, if you will, the HR and accounting services. At this juncture, the cities of Larkspur, the city of, or town of Los Altos Hills have indicated Larkspur is already a member. Los Altos Hills is joining as a member of the Joint Powers Agreement for authorities. And Councilmember Grocott asked that this matter be brought back before the City Council with respect to our role in those Joint Powers Authorities. And so that is the cost for why they are on the agenda for this evening. Staff is making no recommendation with respect to our continued participation in the authorities within this staff report. We have tried to outline what our commitment is to this organization as we speak, and primarily that is the cost involved with the participation in the board meetings as well as the executive committee meetings. The executive committee meets once a month. The board meets once a year generally. Those can go up and down depending upon activities within the board. We've also included some of the previous analysis with respect to potential liabilities associated with our membership in the Joint Powers Agreement. I think moving forward, one of the issues that may be of interest to the City Council is the degree of participation within the board. If the authorities encounter any significant shifts in market or personnel. As it stands right now, currently our support and participation is relatively limited. So that would conclude my report. We would be happy to address any questions that the council might have.
Matt, you want to take the lead on this?
Well, I would just simply say that since we have moved away from using the RGS, LGS, JPA to fill staff positions and so forth, I didn't see the need to continue, and I, just in conversation with the city manager, it's not necessarily a lot of time as he indicated, but there are occasions where he or Brian are needed to go to these board meetings, and I feel that we could use his time and Brian's time in superior ways to attending these meetings. So that's why I asked to have this put on the agenda.
Thank you. Inga.
Yeah, when I got this, my comments to Mark are really, more, do we need to keep the board membership and the position and the time commitment from a board standpoint and executive committee, or can we decouple that from actually involvement in the JPA by, as an alternative option, resigning from the position of being on the board but not necessarily leaving the JPA? Since at some point the city may indeed find itself in a position where they would like to be able to take advantage of some of the contract services that may be available through one of these JPAs. I think I'd be interested in having Mark share his response that I got back to me with the rest of this council, just as a data point as well.
We can participate and receive the services from RGS, LGS as long as it's a viable entity. And so the fact that we would no longer be on the board would lessen our public oversight, if you will, and participation in establishing the rules and regulations for the authorities. However, we, like any other city that currently, or joint powers agreement that currently accesses the services of LGS, RGS, would be able to access those services like any other city, irrespective of whether or not we were on the board. So I don't know that there's any distinct advantage from the perspective of being a potential client of RGS, LGS to being on the board. The one, we've talked about it at the staff level in terms of trying to offer you tangible benefits that board membership provides. It's difficult to come up with something concrete that I can say is something that is tangible for the city of San Carlos by remaining a board member. Beyond the fact that it does give us an opportunity by sitting on the board to have some oversight of the activities of the board and providing some, or participating in the providence of some guidance to those board members. But it really becomes almost a philanthropic kind of activity as opposed to something that you get a tangible result from.
Bob?
I also had time to speak to the city manager about this item, and just those last few words is what I came away with, that we can utilize the service if we need to, and there really isn't any tangible benefit, at least at this point, that we can put our hands on. It's not like we're getting a stipend or a dividend every year from this situation. So as long as we can use the service if we need it in the future, if it's available, like any other city, I also, as Councilman Grocott said, I think utilization of time and so on perhaps would lend itself for us to withdraw at this time.
Well, I guess that's kind of the whole question is, can we stay in the JPA, or is there a tangible reason to leave the JPA rather than just leave the membership in the JPA intact but withdraw or resign from the membership or the executive level and the board positions? Right,
and through what the city manager just said is we can just be like City B, or we don't have to be a member to get the benefit.
So we just be a user?
We just be a user.
Is that correct? Or?
That is correct. The one thing that I would point out is that there are two levels of participation here. One is as a member of the board and being in the authority. And that would require, you could separate if you wanted to split hairs here and say, well, okay, we'll stay as a JPA member. I would still go to an annual board meeting, but I could resign from the executive committee, which meets monthly or perhaps more often as need be to provide the more direct day-to-day oversight of the activities of the JPAs. When I arrived here, we were members of the board. Previous members of the board, all of the board members, as a matter of fact, had representation on the executive committee. And as a matter of fact, the executive committee is not restricted to just board members. For example, the former city manager of San Carlos sits on and chairs the executive committee. And so the executive committee can actually be comprised of more people than what are on the board. But at this time, all of the board members are represented on the executive committee, and so I thought it appropriate that if we were going to be involved with the JPA as a board member, that we ought to be at least monitoring and participating in the month-to-month activities as an executive committee member as well. I don't know if there was more.
Just wanted to add that I wouldn't want to be a member of a JPA, have the city be a member of any JPA without being a participating member and decision-making member, including amendments to the JPA documents for the JPA. I think you're either in or out. I don't think there's a halfway.
And so it's your opinion, really, that if we're not utilizing any of the services and don't have a foreseeable need in the future, the immediate future, for utilizing any of the services that might be offered through this JPA, that there's really no benefit to staying in it, and that it would be better to withdraw, and then at some point, if indeed things change in the future, that we join again.
No, I think through the chair, that's not the point here. We can utilize the services tomorrow after we withdraw. We can utilize the services any time. We can be a customer.
Give an example.
What we're talking about here is whether we want to be in the. Let the city attorney agree with me, but I think he will. Thank you. Nodding his head. What we're saying is here we're taking away. We're just withdrawing from management and from the JPA. It in no way impairs our future use of the services they provide. It's just, why are we there? We're getting nothing out of it except having folks go to meetings, and we help run it, but there's no benefit. There's no dividend. There's no monetary money coming to us. We're just a member. It's great to go to meetings, I guess, but it just doesn't seem to me to be any tangible benefit. But yet we can still utilize the service. And as the city attorney said to me, if I was going to be a member of the JPA, I'd want to be on the executive committee. And if I'm not, but it doesn't hurt us to withdraw in that we can still utilize the service. And we get no discount, as I understand, if we're on the executive committee and use the service. We have to pay the same rate as everybody else. So that's why. Correct. I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify, at least in my mind, what it was.
No, that's my understanding as well.
Back in 2001, we were there because it was our broad idea, us and ABAG, and so we served our purpose. We brought it along. We created what it is. And now we no longer need to provide the staffing for it and the counsel for it, everything that went into it. So it seems to me that we may be at the table, but we don't really have a need to be there. And I think we've done our business and we've made our contribution. But I also think that it's okay to leave. We've been there long enough.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution number 2073.
73.
I'm sorry.
73.
73,